Perfect. All right. Welcome everybody. Welcome David. Thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. All the way from Rise and Shine, San Francisco, right? What time is it right now over there?
We just hit 7 a.m. So bright and early. I'm a morning person, and this is my favorite topic, so I'm excited to join everybody.
Perfect. So the ones of you who actually joined and signed up, just a short recap on Tenbound, and I'm going to let David present himself more in detail. But Tenbound is a research and advisory firm focusing on and dedicated 100% on sales development, performance improvement. As we all know, the sales development industry has exploded the past few years. However, expertise in the subject is still rare. I'm reading right from what you're saying about your company, and I totally agree. It's like everybody is talking about SDRs and BDRs and MDRs and whatever you want to call it, but do we really know what it is? So Tenbound aims to up-level the profession through cutting-edge research, highly practical consulting, training, and coaching programs for all levels of the sales development team. And you also focus a lot on events, right? So that's basically the short background. And David, please tell us more about how did you end up founding Tenbound? What's your background and history, and who are you basically?
Yeah, again, thank you so much for the opportunity and to be able to meet everybody. I really appreciate it. So I was running sales development teams at tech companies here in Silicon Valley for about 7 years at various startups or more mature companies as the manager or the director. And yeah, I saw a need in the marketplace for research and consulting that was really focused on this area, because there were other research and consulting firms that were doing it, but it was just one part of their basket of services. And at least here in the Bay Area and in certain parts of the United States, it's such a hot topic, and it's such a big, complicated topic that we felt that it was the right time to really focus 100% on this area. And like you said at the beginning, the even the acronyms and the vocabulary are still kind of up in the air. What is an SDR? What is a BDR? What is an MDR? What are all these things? So we're trying to be able to define that and offer guidance to clients on how to really maximize those programs.
Okay. So and do you also see the same challenge as, or at least I do here in the Nordics, in terms of I mean, even though it's a hype now, but if we go back to like 99, the year 2000, predictable revenue, Aaron Ross, Salesforce, and everything, like this was basically, I guess, somewhere where it all began. We're now in 2020. Do you still see that people are really not? Is there more an interest, or is it actually that people are applying it, or are they just interested and like curious about how could we use this?
Yeah, that's a good question. So many companies, this is why we've been pretty busy, over the last 3 or 4 years, are implementing a sales development program at their company. And there's a lot of confusion out there on how to put it together, how to run the strategy, and what they should be doing. Even where it should be reporting is still kind of up in the air, whether it's marketing or sales operations. So there's still a lot of confusion out there. But it's an interesting time because, since, as you mentioned, the 2000, the Aaron Ross predictable revenue, roadmap that he put out with that book, companies have realized, hey, we need this function, and we need someone focused on this particular part of the funnel. So they know that they need it, and so they go ahead and implement it, and then we have an expression, it becomes sort of a hot potato. So you know, people they get the program, they have it for a while, and then they're just like, this is a mess, you know. So they throw it to the next person down the line and hope that they can figure it out. So you know, we have a long way to go to up level, you know, the profession, and that's kind of what we're working on.
So much like I would say the ones who've been attending our webinars know that we do. I mean, we promote the combination of inbound marketing, uh, and here we go, account-based marketing, social selling. You know, there are so many content marketing. Like, what's the difference between content marketing and inbound marketing? What's the difference between key account management and account-based marketing? Like, uh, a lot of wordings, a lot of like hot potatoes and interesting stuff, but how can we actually make everything work together? And there are a lot of sales enablement tools as well. So first you focus on the SDR role, and then you want to buy a tool to be able to work with sales enablement, even though nobody really knows what it is, depending on who you're asking, right? So I love that your mission is to educate and make companies and people understand how to get the most out of this. But
Yeah.
let me get to the first agenda question I have, which is why do most SaaS companies and other industries as well actually have SDR teams? What is the background reason for this? What took them to the decision to implement an SDR organization? Doing it correctly or not, but what made them actually end up there? Let's start there.
Yeah, really good question. So what we see is it goes back to the blueprint that was laid out by Aaron Ross in Predictable Revenue in documenting how Salesforce.com was able to grow their subscription business so quickly. And a key part of that was the sales development organization. So I think that really planted a seed in high growth, especially software as a service, SaaS companies, that we should look into this department and potentially implement it at our company. So I think that happened, like you said, that was what, 15 years ago, and that sort of sparked the renewed interest in this. And the other thing that's happened is with the advent of inbound marketing and generating a lot of leads and things like that, you would think that once we have that top of the funnel set up and it's running correctly, we could just send those leads directly to the full cycle account executives, and they would be able to take that lead and convert it to pipeline. Or we could lean on the account executives and say, okay, here's a list of accounts that we want to go after from an account-based perspective. Cold call them, send them emails, social sell, you know, on the various platforms, set up appointments, and generate pipeline. But what's missing from that assumption is that that's not really the job of a full cycle account executive. You know, if you look at the best case scenario, would be the full cycle account executive has a calendar full of qualified appointments where they can have conversations with qualified buyers and run demonstrations and close deals, build pipeline and close deals. And so the reality that we see out there in the marketplace is that those full cycle account executives have kind of not been doing a lot of prospecting. Prospecting and following up on inbound leads is it's hard work, and you can't just they call it like spray and pray. So you can't just send 5,000 emails to a bunch of people and hope for the best. You know, in nowadays, the outreach and the follow-up has to be human. It has to be customized, and the sales reps are not, you know, spending as much time on this, and so there's a gap in the process, and that's fulfilled by sales development team. So the sales development team can spend the time doing that labor, you know, in order to either qualify inbound leads and set appointments, or go outbound and do the cold calling, cold emailing, and social selling to work with the account executives. So again, all these factors have driven the interest in this topic, and so now we see a lot of, most, at least software as a service companies here in Silicon Valley have dedicated sales development programs.
Why do you think? Why do you think this role is needed? Why do you think account executives are bad at prospecting? Is it they don't know how, they don't like it, they're not set up to do it? What do you think? Why do you think we need SDRs to do this, like pre-selling phase, if you wish?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm old school, so I've been around for 20 years. And when I sound like an old man, but when I was coming up in the sales profession, the expectation was that the sales rep would do this. That they would chunk off a portion of their day to follow up on inbound leads and cold call companies, or do account-based marketing to companies. And that expectation is still there, but a lot of companies see the sales development organization as another push that's really focused on just that one particular part of the sales rep's job. And so the sales rep can free up more time to land bigger deals, do more demos, have more conversations with qualified prospects, versus spending all their time, sifting through hundreds of inbound leads or doing a ton of cold calls. So what I hear out there with our clients and most companies is there is still an expectation that the sales rep is doing prospecting, and they're qualifying inbound leads, and they're going out to companies to land appointments. But that's really just one part of their job, where there's also the sales development team that is the entire part of their job, to get those appointments set and build that pipeline. So
how do you decide who's going to do the prospecting if you have two sides? Like, you have the account executives, you have the ones who actually are going to do this full time. You don't see the risk of ending up in a this is my lead, let me do the prospecting, this is what I should be doing, and you should be closing? Or is this not an issue?
Yeah, it is an issue. And if we take a step back, there's an important aspect of setting up that modern sales machine that a lot of companies are really focused on, and it could be called sales operations. A new term that's coming out is revenue operations, and essentially it's plugging in all the different systems to make sure that the account executives are calling on the right accounts at the right time, and the SDRs are calling on the right accounts at the right time. And so first thing is, companies really have to make sure that they have everything set up correctly on the back end, so we don't have that situation that you're describing where two people are calling exactly the same person from the same company, and it damages the brand. Bigger picture though, if you think about it, the account executive is a highly compensated individual, highly skilled. They really are. Their aim is to sell as much as possible, bring in the big deals. So as the manager, I want them to be focused on those A accounts, those big, meaningful accounts that can make a big, meaningful difference to the business. And they should be focused on a handful of those A accounts at the top of the pyramid, if you will, of priority, and building relationships, meeting people, taking people out to dinner, really that classic sales motion of building relationships at those top accounts. And then, they can really focus on that when it comes to prospecting. And then they give, the sort of the B accounts to the sales development team, which are, they're great accounts. They could pay the bills, and we should definitely be talking to them. But there's only enough time in the day for people to prioritize and focus. So let's give the A accounts, to the sales reps, give the B accounts the longer list to the sales development team.
So what you're saying actually is that the A accounts, that would be a full responsibility of the sales team, like the account executives, from researching to doing the prospecting to booking the meetings to closing leads.
Yeah, they might be able to get some help on sort of the very time-consuming aspects of doing the research and pulling names and sort of the for lack of a better word, the lower skilled activities.
Yeah.
They could ask for some help from their SDR team to build those lists and get a good plan in place. But when it comes to actually writing a personalized email to the CEO of one of your top accounts, or placing a phone call, or reaching out over social to create a relationship, that should be 100% owned by the account executive, because that relationship is too critical to have anyone else work on.
That's a really interesting and really valuable point. I totally agree on that. And I think maybe this is one of the things that many companies think when they think SDRs, they kind of think they're going to do the prospecting on all accounts, even the big, like valuable, like high valuable accounts. So your point is it's a perfect like way to putting it, that it's not like destroying your potential accounts, but because if we're being honest, an SDR and a account manager or account executive, it is a different person. It is a different way, a different role, basically. Which takes me to another question. Do you see a challenge when building SDR organizations in the fact that many SDRs want to move up the ladder and become account executives or account managers, and basically they don't want to stay SDRs?
Yeah, it's an issue, in the SDR world, because and the roots go back to how Salesforce was organized, where there was it's almost a machine. You come in as an inbound SDR, or I think they call them BDRs, or but you come in as an inbound person, then you go to outbound, then you're hybrid, and then you go to a junior account executive. And so they would use that, and a lot of companies do this. They use that career progression as a sales pitch when they're recruiting people to do this job, because it's a hard job. It's not a super well compensated job in a lot of companies, and it's hard to find people that really want to go for it. And so companies for several years have been using that career progression as a sales pitch in their recruiting to get people in. And it's caused all kinds of problems, because now people get recruited to these companies, and within 3 to 6 months, they're like, this job sucks. I want to be one of those account executives where I could go fly around the world on airplanes and make $100,000 and things like that. So it's caused a lot of issues. And so the recommendation that we give to clients is be fully transparent in the recruiting process, and let them know, especially if there is no career path set up at the company, or the company sells to large, complex organizations where the sales rep needs 20 or 30 years of experience in order to be effective. Your 21-year-old SDR is not going to be moving into one of those roles within 3 to 6 months. It's just impossible. And so if you're not transparent in the recruiting process, and letting them know what the reality of the situation is, you're going to have an unhappy SDR, in six months. And you really, I mean, of course, I run 10 bound, so I'm very excited about SDRs. You really need a great SDR in the seat, if you have one or two or a whole team, because the SDRs are building pipeline for your sales organization, and sales, is the lifeblood of any company, whether it's a small company or a major enterprise. So you've got to nail this organization. You don't want a bunch of people who are upset because they're not being promoted.
And which very naturally takes me to the follow-up question. How do you define, what kind of traits do you look for when you look for SDRs? What is a really good SDR? What does she or he need to have in traits and personality to be able to succeed?
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and I don't want to give you a consultant answer because that's kind of weenie, but it does really depend on the company and the industry and those factors of what's important at the company. But generally, it is a hard job. It takes a lot of uh, focus, concentration, research, and perseverance in reaching out to people. You could go for a whole day, even if you're reaching out on inbound leads, a whole day or a whole few days without contacting anyone. And so that perseverance is very critical. The other thing that I've seen that's been very important for success is a curiosity and wanting to learn about the industry that they're in, because they're coming in as early career professionals, and so we're asking them to research large lists and make hundreds of phone calls every week to people who may or may not be interested. It's really tough, but if they have a curiosity toward your company and toward the industry, and they want to learn and grow, that's going to be the type of person that could potentially grow with the company and become really, really valuable. But I keep going back to Salesforce, but a number of the big successful software companies here in the Valley, they hire the best and brightest into the SDR organization, and they give them a lot of training, they give them a lot of career opportunities, and they end up, they don't end up being an SDR forever. They end up either going into as a junior sales rep, or I've seen them go into marketing, product development, operations. If you can find a great person and they're really, curious about the company and the industry, then you could hire someone who can really take your company to the next level, which is great.
Yeah, and that's also interesting because when you say that some of them move into product, others into marketing, it really puts like this really shows that it's a complicated role. You need to be like it's not a traditional inside salesperson. It's not a marketer making prospecting calls. It's a combination like in between all of these worlds. And I also love what you said in the beginning, right when we started, that you need to put a human being into the automation. Like basically everything is automated. We do inbound, we convert website visitors and stuff, but we need to follow up either by email or by a phone call and have a conversation. And you said that these are people who just recently started in sales, maybe a few years experience in sales. If I ask you, because I have a few different I'm thinking about this also every single day, basically, because this is what we focus on as well. What would happen if we bring in even more senior people into the SDR role? Would that be an option, or is that kind of and I don't know if I'm saying account executives make them SDRs, but more like, is age a thing? Is experience important? Like, where do we draw the line? This is a traditional standard, really good SDR. This is somebody's going to close the big deals. Do we have any lines we draw there in terms of experience, etc., etc.?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So if you can reverse engineer your goals for the SDR team in a spreadsheet. And I'll tell you why I'm starting with this, but if you look at the revenue goals that you're expecting from the SDR group, and you reverse back to the pipeline amount that's going to convert to the revenue goal that you have, and then you reverse back to the number of qualified appointments that you need in order to hit that pipeline goal, and then all the activities that need to happen in order to be able to set those appointments and build that pipeline. And that's a numbers in a spreadsheet. So we always recommend that it really doesn't matter if it's a new graduate or someone in the middle of their career, or even someone at the, in a transitional period who just wants to work from home because they've got some family issues and things like that. As long as they can hit their number on a spreadsheet, what they look like or what their experience is really doesn't matter. There's a so that's one way to look at it. If you just want the somebody to personalize your outreach, set appointments, drive pipeline, and help you to grow your sales, then you can look at it from a spreadsheet perspective. It's numbers plugged into a spreadsheet. Whoever we get, that becomes almost irrelevant. Or you can look at it that I want to build the next generation of people at the company, and that's the view that your big tech companies take here, where they look at it that, okay, we're going to find, like I said, the best and the brightest, the most curious, perseverance, bright people, and bring them into the organization as SDRs. And then we're going to train them, we're going to take care of them, and hopefully they'll stay with us for 5 or 10 years and help us to build the company. So, it really just depends if you want, to bring in the sort of next generation at your company, or if you just want appointments and pipeline. So there's different ways to look at it.
So on a personal level, I have a question. When a client asks me and tells me, hey, we want to have appointments booked, how many can we get? And that's kind of thinking, we're not a telemarketing firm. This is not what we do, but yes, we will build pipeline and give you appointments. What would your answer be if is this happening to you guys as well? Like they're pushing for, I want to have X amount of appointments. I don't really care what you do before and after. I want to have pipeline built, appointments booked. Is this a challenge you see when you're working with your clients? And if so, what would your answer be to that client?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Because we've been doing a lot of research on the outsourced SDR industry, because there's a tremendous amount of interest in what you're talking about. Companies are looking at the process of building their own SDR organization at their company, and they're saying, oh my God, forget it. I don't even want to do this. So there's a tremendous amount of interest in just hiring a firm to set the appointments, or make the cold calls. And so we've been looking at this, and we found that you can kind of bucket those into 3 different subsets. So there's the appointment setting companies, where you pay for appointments. There's retainer-based companies, where you just pay for the month, and they promise to do a number of activities. And then there's just sort of the spam, LinkedIn spam companies with just those millions of LinkedIn messages that you get every day from automated robots, basically. And so the reason I bring this up is, to your question, setting appointments is something that will take a lot of feedback and work from the company working with the outsourced company to be able to dial in the type of people and the type of appointments that the company needs. And if I would say, if you as a company are willing to spend the time with the outsourced firm and train them and coach them and work with them over what could be a 3 to 6 month process, then they can start to set the right appointments that you actually need. But
Yeah.
if you think that you can just hand them the football and go, here, go get me some appointments, you're going to waste a lot of time and money, a lot of time and money, because they need your help in order to do that.
Yeah, and exactly, and I think that clients, including myself, when I buy consultancy services, we're as humans, we're pretty, we're not very tolerant. We're not very long-term focused. We want to have results now, and we want to have, I mean, yeah, book meetings. That's it. But when you look at the SDR role, which is, I mean, one of the challenges is that it's pretty complex. It's you can't really place it. Some companies place the SDRs in the sales department, others place it in the marketing department. What's your experience here? Is it a marketing role doing sales? Is it a salesperson understanding marketing? Is it somewhere in between? Where should we place this valuable resource?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. So even taking a step back, there's a misconception that sales development is, oh, it's easy. You just hire some people, plug in some tools, give them some lists of people to call, and then stick them in the corner and hope for the best. And so people do that either as their in-house, team, or working with outsource. So if you take away anything from the webinar, you need to be more strategic in putting your program together, even if that's just using a whiteboard and mapping everything out, or making a flow chart of how things are going to work from the top of your funnel to an appointment to pipeline and sales. So you need to be more strategic. But to your question, um, so most of the research that we have shows that about 70% of these organizations report to sales. And that's in high growth companies here in the United States. So not as super familiar with Europe, but most of these organizations report to sales. And that makes a lot of sense, because ultimately it is a kind of a quasi sales position, because you're having to go out and talk to strangers essentially and have conversations that are interesting and compelling in order to move them to the next step, which is a lot of what we do in sales, right? We have to be interesting and compelling and move people through a pipeline. And so most of these organizations roll up to sales. The downside of rolling up to sales is that sales is receiving the output from the sales development team. And so they're almost sort of a passive recipient of the appointments that are coming from the sales development team. And so they can, what we see a lot is they can just get into a situation where they're waiting around and complaining about the production of the sales development team. And there's a lot of griping and people complaining to the VP of sales about how the sales development team sucks. So that's not good, because that creates a bunch of finger pointing within the organization that's negative, and it doesn't help anybody. If you flip it around and have the team report to marketing, there's some benefits there as well, because they can be in sync with the marketing department on the campaigns that they're running. And they're synchronized in a way that, okay, we're going to be going to this event, we're going to be running this webinar, we're going to have a dinner with our main clients, and the sales development team can really be in lockstep with what marketing's doing. And marketing also tends to be more metrics driven. So a lot of what sales development programs are doing is driving conversion rates. And so if you have a metrics-driven marketer, they can look at those conversion rates and really analyze why are some of these leads converting and others are not. So they can work with the sales development team to do that. So that makes a lot of sense. And then on the flip side of reporting to marketing is that the relationship sometimes is not great between the marketing and sales department. There's some natural friction there. And so if the sales development team is working with the marketing team, they become sort of, oh, those marketers, the sales team is unhappy with not only the marketing department, but also now they're unhappy with the SDR team. So that's
Yeah.
not good as well. So
And what if we, because I've obviously been thinking about this in different ways as well. What if we say that this is a sales role who reports to sales, but we place this guy or this girl in the marketing department? Is this is this something we can do? And the reason why I'm asking is, if you know that this is a sales resource who reports to sales, but we're placing this person in the marketing department to be able to function as a psychologist, like making them talk to one another and understand what they need to do. Like, because if you're in the marketing campaigns and you're sitting down in sales meetings and defining your ideal customer profiles, the focus customers for this quarter and the next one, and if you can merge these two worlds together and be the one who actually stands in between and makes this happen, is that kind of a fantasy, or do you know what I'm getting at? Is it even possible?
yeah, I think it's totally possible. And so there's a few things. One is if you have a strong marketing leader, a strong sales development leader, or manager of the sales development program, and you have a strong VP of sales, if those three roles are working together in a positive way and they're rowing in the same direction, it really doesn't matter if the SDR team rolls up to marketing or sales, because they're working as a revenue organization.
Yeah.
And that mentality we see at the best sales development programs have that mentality where everybody gets it, they want to improve, and they're working on the same project basically, which is to drive revenue for the company. And so where we see it not work is if the marketing and sales are not getting along, and the sales development leader is sort of a redheaded stepchild in the middle. Like, again, they become a human hot potato
Yeah.
because they're trying to work with these very strong personalities and their egos, and becomes a nightmare.
Exactly. And then you also have you've mentioned revenue, the revenue organization. Another popular way of naming this is demand generation. So basically, and I heard also obviously the growth team.
Yeah.
Are we actually seeing marketing and sales departments merging into a growth organization, a revenue organization? And if so, do we see this development in specific industries or a specific type of companies? And do you believe that this is something we're moving into, where we don't have marketing and sales? We only have revenue, demand gen, and growth.
Yeah, I mean, I think people's traditions and their biases are very strong, and it's like there's the old expression where if a tree is just planted, it's pretty easy to pull it out, but once it becomes a big tree, it becomes harder and harder to pull out. So I don't see those silos going anywhere anytime soon at most companies. But if I was starting, and actually we do this here at Tenbound, we don't have a sales organization or a marketing organization. We just have a revenue organization. So if you could start fresh and set up things in a way that is forward thinking. It works for your company. You may want to look at just not even having those silos anymore and making it a revenue organization that is aligned with your funnel, from attention to conversations, pipeline, and sales. Just make sure that everyone's on the same page. And to your point, it's interesting. Um, there is the newer title of growth marketing that's happened in the last 5 or 10 years, and where we see that a lot is in companies that have a freemium product, and it's real easy to go on, sign up for a free product, you start using it, suddenly it's not doing what you want anymore, and in order to get what you want, you have to put in your credit card, right? So that they call it like product-led growth. That's huge right now, here in Silicon Valley. And so we think about, well, where do these traditional silos fit into that? And they still are relevant. You've got to market the free product. Somebody, if you get to a certain point, somebody has to talk to a human being if you're going to sell a bigger deal. And so sales development and sales still have a role there. But overall, what are we trying to do? We're trying to grow revenue. And so, that's, and one last quick thing on that is, they just announced yesterday that IBM chose Slack
I know.
over Microsoft Teams. And it's hilarious because if you look back a couple of years, Slack's big thing was, we don't have any salespeople. We don't have any salespeople. We just put it up. You can get it for free, and then if you want more, you swipe your credit card. Well, fast forward 2 or 3 years, Slack has a huge sales development program, probably over 150 SDRs and BDRs, and a huge sales organization, because they realized that you have to talk to people still. We haven't invented a robot that allows you to just sell, to IBM, uh, giant multi-million-dollar deals with a credit card. So
No. And this is what I love about this. And this is what I preach every single day as well.
yeah,
You can talk about AI, you can talk about robots, automation, inbound, the buyer is making all the decisions, the buyer has all the answers. No, no. It's not going to, I'm totally convinced we're going to need fewer salespeople, but the ones who are going to stay in sales are going to be more relevant, better at what they do, more educated, more trained, exactly what you're saying. But I mean, I think it's going to be many, many years before we like, that's a really good example. I'm going to use that one as well. Like, how do you go from like in a few years swiping credit cards to having a few hundred salespeople? It's obviously at the same time as the market is very much about buyers in control, automation taking over, buy everything with a few clicks. It's fascinating, really
yeah,
fascinating.
100%. I mean, I could rattle off, other examples. You have Atlassian.
Yeah,
Atlassian, no salespeople, now a huge organization. HubSpot, which is the classic inbound marketing company. If you're an inbound marketing company, why do you need salespeople? Well, they've got hundreds of sales SDRs and salespeople. So
that is one of the most that is one of the funniest because we sell HubSpot licenses, so we build like our consultancy business on HubSpot. And
yeah,
I've made several trips to Dublin and to Boston and met with them, and it's hardcore selling in a good way. It's not like pushing, but it's still a lot of headcounts, a lot of salespeople. And exactly as you said, hey, they do inbound. Let the customers come to us. No, it's not. That's not the way it works.
yeah.
Eventually, somebody wants to talk to somebody. Eventually, we're going to find out that we're actually human beings.
Yeah, 100%. And I look at all the technology to support, because there's so much stuff out there. We've actually pulled together the first market map on sales development, tools and services, and we're putting out V5. There's hundreds of companies that are set up to help sales development reps to be more efficient. And I look at it as, Iron Man, Jarvis and Iron Man. You still have to have Tony Stark in the suit. You can't just send Iron Man out there by himself, because Tony Stark is what brings the organic flavor to the conversation. So we're more and more, I mean, at least in the near term, and we could watch this webinar in 5 years, and you could say, okay, now we've gotten to the point where robots can handle human interaction in a persuasive and effective way, but we're just not there yet. And so until then, we've got to have these teams that are interacting with customers.
So speaking of teams, this is another hot potato. How do we set sales goals, budgets? How do we commission? How do we pay the SDRs? How do we set expectations, responsibilities between, like, if we have a pretty traditional way of doing it, and let's say that this is a company doing inbound marketing, we generate some inbound leads, they convert into classical marketing qualified leads, sales qualified, sales opportunities, they close, or we lose them as customers. And we need to have an organization supporting this. So we have marketers, growth hackers, inbound marketers, whatever we call them. We have SDRs, BDRs, MDRs, PDRs, product development reps. Why not? Like any
CDRs,
like
yeah.
Exactly, you have junior and senior. So we have them, and then we have account executives. We might have key account managers or account managers and customer success. So how do we make this, turn this into a revenue team where we don't compete with one another, and what kind of metrics would we then work against as a team and individually to be able to produce the most revenue for the company as possible without too much friction internally? Big question.
Yeah, really good question.
We still have another 40 minutes, so yeah.
Yeah, how much time do you have? So I would start by looking at the different sizes of the organization. So maybe if someone on the call is a founder, a technical founder, and they're thinking about hiring a salesperson right now, or they're a mid-market company and they just need more pipeline for their sales team, or they're an enterprise company and they need to start to break into different parts of organizations in order to do upsells and cross sells. So you really have to first stop and say, okay, what's my company size? What is my aim here? And how can we make sure that we do this in the most efficient way? So I'll just start with the technical founder. You have a great product and you need to bring it to market. You're doing some Google ads, you're working with Oliver's organization to bring in some inbound leads. Things are going pretty well from an inbound perspective. So before you hire your first salesperson, I would take a look at your calendar. Or if you already have a salesperson, look at their calendar. Is their calendar filled, or is your calendar filled when you can put it in with qualified new business opportunity appointments? Is it filled to the point where you're just running around like a crazy person? Because if it is, then you're in pretty good shape. You actually need to hire another salesperson so that you can take some of those appointments off of your calendar and start to work on other stuff. But if your calendar is not filled to the max with these qualified sales appointments, what I would suggest is you look at, okay, let's split the head count and have one SDR whose job is to fill up everybody's calendar with those high quality appointments. And instead of just continuing to hire salespeople, which is what most companies do, we break off at least one or two headcount for an SDR. So that's the first thing that I would look at if you're in that stage. If you're in more of a mid-market, like you've got some traction, you've got some sales, you're doing a few $1 million a year, then from a metrics perspective, it's the same equation basically. You've got salespeople on this side who you want to look at their calendar and make sure that it's full of appointments. And then you've got the SDR team who's in charge of filling that calendar with appointments. And so then again, we have to reverse engineer it back. What are the activities and what are the metrics that we need to be following to make sure that we're setting enough appointments and we're getting that pipeline flowing for the sales team? And that's going to be different at different companies. Some industries, they answer the phone. So if it's a phone heavy industry, then those activities probably would include making phone calls. Some industries don't do any phone calls, but they answer their email. Other industries are only on social, and that's the best way to contact them. And also, looking at the activity metrics there from both an outbound and an inbound perspective, and dialing in what the SDRs should be doing on a daily basis to set those appointments and build the pipeline. So that's kind of a mid-market example. Then you have, if you're a big, huge enterprise and you're trying to cross sell and get into different parts of the organization, this might be a little more tricky, and the SDR might have to work even on a one-to-one basis with the senior account executive to map out the organization, make sure they're talking to the right people, and to set up those appointments. So those are some basic examples, but it really just depends on where you are in your company's life cycle.
Okay, but if we like, if you were forced to, like, if I would ask you, let's say we're a mid-sized company, we have a marketing department, we're generating some inbound leads, we need to do outbound prospecting as well. We like the idea of SDRs and BDRs, and then we have a few salespeople who are supposed to be closing deals, high quality both meetings and pipeline, right?
Yeah.
What would be like, what kind of metrics would you set on the SDR in terms of with the goal of supporting the sales team with high quality meetings, maybe doing research, maybe breaking the ice, maybe getting into new accounts? Do you have maybe 2-3 different KPIs you would say? In most cases, I would definitely I would track the SDRs on these KPIs, and also if you have a few additional ones for the account executive, that would be interesting.
Yeah, so I would start with what's called a service level agreement. And this is something that's it's from the manufacturing industry, if anybody's in the manufacturing industry, but it's basically saying that we've got two different departments here. We've got the SDRs and we've got the AEs. And the service level agreement is just 4 or 5 bullet points that says the SDR will produce an appointment containing these 3 or 4 factors. I'll give you an example. So the company has to be above 1,000 employees. The person on the appointment has to be a director or above. And they have to have identified at least one pain point that the company can solve. Okay, great. SDR has those 3 things. They have to have those 3 things in order to be able to set up the appointment. On the AE side, their service level agreement is, I promise, to research the company properly, prepare for the meeting, show up, and track all the relevant details in the CRM. And that's their service level agreement back to the SDR. So once you have that service level agreement agreed upon by both sides, now we know that we're all rowing in the same direction, and we can focus on what are the metrics that we need to hit in order to set up a meeting like that. And so there's going to be some trial and error. I mean, if you're just starting an SDR organization, it's probably going to take a few months to figure out how many phone calls, how many inbound leads, how many outbound emails, etc. we need in order to hit be able to set one of those appointments. So you got to be a little bit patient, try to figure out what is that right mix. And then once you have those metrics set up, then it's a question of management. You have to hold the SDRs accountable to hit those activity metrics every day, and then ultimately hold them accountable to set 5 to 10 appointments that meet the service level agreement each week. And then you have to hold the AE accountable to fulfill their service level agreement and complete, let's say 80% of the meetings and build X amount of pipeline that you can track back to the SDR organization. So
Should we
it's all about activities, appointments, pipeline, and ultimately revenue. Those are the big factors that you want to be tracking.
should we track the SDRs on pipeline built as well, or just meetings booked?
Yeah, some of the best run organizations out there use pipeline as the main metric, because at the end of the day, who cares how many people you call or how many appointments you set? It's really, do we have enough pipeline that's converting at the right rate in order to hit our revenue goals?
Yeah.
Those are the most important things. So some of the best run organizations out there, they hold the sales development leader accountable to pipeline and converted revenue. Those are the metrics for the leader. And then the leader then cascades those goals down pipeline and activity, appointments and activity to the SDR team.
That's interesting. Let me just quickly go back to the service level agreement, which is in our world. So we've been HubSpot partners for almost 8 years. So we began doing like inbound, moving inbound into the way we sell and the way our clients sell. So from the beginning, I guess, or maybe in parallel, the service level agreement, this also exists between marketing and sales. So if you don't have an SDR organization, you're generating marketing qualified leads, and if eventually those will close into sales qualified or accepted leads and meetings booked and opportunities. So it's basically the same thing, right? The SDR is an extension of the marketing organization, basically doing the same thing, but in the sales organization, right?
Correct.
So
exactly.
My question then is, do we need marketing, or should we just do should we hire a bunch of really good digital marketing savvy, young, up and coming, knowledge thirsting SDRs to do lead generation, and then we could have maybe 2 or 3 marketers doing brand, and even though personal brand is more important than the company brand today, is my opinion, we might not even need marketing branding. But let's say we do. Should we just get rid of marketing and just do this is the revenue team? We'll call marketers when we need them, but most of the time we don't, because we're closing deals in business, we're building pipeline. Is that, I've heard this from sales managers, and I've thought about it myself. Is this where we're going, or what's your take on this?
Yeah, I think that whatever you call the particular job assignments of people is what they're used to, and it might be kind of a hard sell when you're recruiting to get people to come in and have a completely different job title that they're used to, because your ego is really wrapped up in the fact that you're a VP of demand gen and things like that. So that might be kind of a tough sell, but what we've been talking about is, at the end of the day, it's a funnel. It's a funnel, and so different people have different responsibilities to move the attention that we're getting from people down through the funnel to make them close sales that reach our revenue targets. And so however we plug people in specifically to hit that, that's unique to the company. And so I think that there's kind of a double-sided answer. I mean, we still need the expertise of the people that can drive MQLs and understand how they're converting to appointments and work with the SDR organization. But maybe they're just not, at someday they're not called marketers anymore. It's just the revenue team.
Yeah, and the reason why I read an article a few months ago, I forgot its name, but one of the founders of Marketo, he wrote a really good article where he said that, hey, marketers, we've been doing inbound for maybe 8, 9, 10 years now. We're still having the same challenges. We're not showing revenue. We're not delivering results. This is your chance to convince the sales team that you're still relevant. Really good article. I'll see if I can find it. I'll send it over to you. And this is the guy who founded Marketo. Then again,
Yeah.
what does he do today? He leads a sales enablement company where this article fitted really good into the product he's selling today. But anyway, it's a fair point. Like, it's a good point. Doing inbound for several years. In some cases, we have even bigger challenges than we had before, because we're getting into, as marketers, we're getting into the sales machine, saying that we can help the sales team bring revenue into the company, but we're failing. So eventually the sales team and the VPs in sales and the leaders of the company are going to say, hey, and I've met several clients we've worked with who've actually told me, yeah, we tried inbound for a few years, it's not working. And it's not about inbound, it's about the things you're mentioning, like the process, the SLAs, the way we should be able to work together, right?
Yeah, I mean, there's a great marketer over here named Matt Hines, and he had his famous thing was, you can't buy a beer with an MQL. So essentially, you could be over there producing MQLs and even going back further, creating pens and T-shirts and doing all this brand stuff, and that's great. I mean, you need that, especially when you get bigger as a company. But you can't buy a beer with an MQL. So somebody needs to look at it from a higher level perspective, work with the SDR team to take that MQL and make it into a conversation that leads to pipeline. And I think that's where we're going here.
Yeah, exactly. I love that. I'm gonna steal that one as well. Perfect. Let's just briefly get back to metrics. I'm really interested. Again, depends on the size of the company, the kind of company you're working with. But is it like fair to say, I heard you mentioning that an SDR probably should be setting in between 5 to 10 appointments per week. Is that a fair estimation in terms of what can we expect? Like, if we implement an SDR organization, they're onboarded, they're trained, they have everything they need. Should we expect 1 to 2 meetings booked per day? Is that a fair number?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I look at it that coming up with the effective service level agreement is step one, and that's really that. It's a hypothesis at first, because you need to test it in the marketplace to see if it's even possible. And that's going back to your outsource organizations that are like, I just want appointments. Well, is that even possible to get these appointments? We don't even know. So once we've tested the SLA, we're pretty confident, and we feel like it's a stretch goal to set up 5 appointments a week, for example. Then once the SDR is fully ramped, and that's a doable target, then it's a question of accountability. What I see a lot with SDR organizations is they don't have the SLA, so they don't know what nobody's agreed upon what a meeting or an appointment looks like, and that's strike one. That's terrible. And then they have unrealistic expectations for the SDR. They're saying, oh, you need to get 12 qualified appointments per week in your first month on the job, and it's just there's no strategy behind it. There's no iteration. There's no analysis. And that's when the SDR will burn out and probably fail because it's just poorly designed.
So yeah. So the question back to the sales leader would be, how many appointments do your account executives set each week? Well, no,
Yeah.
maybe 1 or none, because they're out like having lunch or dinner with existing clients and accounts. I could run on this for many hours as well, but You've been there as well. And again, if we go 5 to 10 appointments, how many? And this is from my perspective, and this is why it's so interesting to have this webinar and to be able to discuss this with you. I love phone calls. Like, you can send emails, you can email a bunch of people, that's fine. But when you actually get them on the phone, I would any day replace 50 emails with 5 minutes on the phone with somebody who's a potential buyer. Like, how do you then make, like, to get to 5 or 10 appointments? How many, like, if we go down to activities, how many phone calls or calling attempts do you need to make? Do you always track emails and other activities as well? How do you set those metrics if we agree on, let's say, 8 appointments per week? How do we break this down into phone calls, emails, and any other LinkedIn messages? What kind of metrics? Is there a formula to do this?
Yeah, so and there's tools now. Of course, I mean, HubSpot has a sales engagement platform, and some of the big tools in this case are SalesLoft, Outreach, VanillaSoft. There's tools specifically to be able to do this. And so I would just go back to say, at first, we're really testing the waters. We're trying to see, because you don't just make up numbers, and this is the gold standard of activity metrics. At first, it's going to take some trial and error. So if you're starting a sales development program, I would say right now, hey, we need volume of activities. So we need to be, calling 100 people a day plus, having 10 conversations, sending out 100 emails, and talking, having at least 20 or 30 conversations on social media every day, and see how close that we can get to it. Because basically we're testing to see which of these mediums is going to have the best result back to us. And then once we find out that, okay, in our industry, phone calls are the most effective. We can catch people on the phone. What we're seeing is that between 8 and 9 a.m. is the best time to catch them. And then if we have a good script and we're well trained, we can set appointments right there. Okay, now we have that information. All right, let's double down. Everybody's gonna, make 100 phone calls a day, have 10 appointments, and this is the conversion rate that we want to see. Now, if you're calling into cybersecurity, which I worked for about 2 years as a manager of a sales development program for cybersecurity. Cybersecurity people do not answer their phone. Okay, they'd be insane to answer their phone because they're probably being phished, or they're being hacked by social engineering. So they don't answer their phone. So you have to find other ways, and it's email and social and live events. So in that case, if we find out, okay, we know that we need to send 50 customized emails every day and have at least one live event per month in the major cities, then that's what we're going to do. And we're going to double down on that, work our butts off to hit our appointment and pipeline goals. So a little bit of experimentation, find a pattern that you can identify, stick with that until it's not working anymore, and then go back to experimentation, and just continue to do it.
Here's the thing. If I would ask 50 salespeople about their industry, and if people are answering the phone, I will get 51 no's. Another one would pitch in and say, no, mine neither. So that's the challenge, because people today, specifically I think the new generation, they don't know that you can actually call using your phone. It's not only texting and messaging. You can actually call and speak to people on the phone. So I can buy cybersecurity, I get it. But how many industries, honestly, are not answering their phone, as opposed to the SDR is calling during meeting times, calling not early, not late, not during lunch, or whenever you need to call to get hold of them? Like, is it a valid excuse to say, hey, nobody's answering the phone? What's your take on that? Can we reach people on the phone today, or are we like, have everyone given up?
Yeah, it's a really good point because calling someone out of the blue is scary and uncomfortable and we can swipe left, swipe right, order food, do everything on our phone without actually talking to a human being. So, I get it. Like talking to people on the phone is scary, but going back to the experimentation, if you don't ever try calling and you're just scared and you never experiment with a large number of phone calls, you're never going to know if that's an effective medium. And so it could be that you're losing a channel that's super effective in your
Yeah.
industry and you just don't know because you were scared to pick up the phone. And so I would say, yeah, just try it. Try email, try social, try smoke writing, in the sky. I mean, whatever it takes, because we're trying to get those appointments set so we can build pipeline.
Exactly, and exactly. But it's something with the phone that people, and I get it. Also, I also get it. It's scary. But I mean, if we don't try, what if this is one of the questions I have, like, from the listeners or the ones attending the webinar. What if we let's say we have a metric of 25 phone calls a day, because we want to try it. We never tried calling these people. We want to try calling them, and week after week we end up like, I made 5 attempts, 8 attempts, 4 attempts, 11. Like, we're not getting there. How do I manage, and what do I do with the SDRs who know that they have a metric to aim for, but they're not doing it? How do we
Yeah.
manage and train them? How do we interact with them?
Well, the number of dials, and this is kind of controversial, but bear with me. So the number of dials really is irrelevant because if it takes 100 dials or 10 dials, it's the conversations that's important, and how effective you are in having a conversation that leads to an appointment that leads to pipeline. So for some people, it could take 100 dials. For some people, it could take 2, right? And so it's hard to hold people accountable to those activity metrics because they like you said, they start to get bored or resentful and things like that if you're saying you have to make 100 phone calls every day. So I
Yeah.
would recommend, and what we've seen really be effective with our clients is you hold people accountable to a conversation number every day. So you
Okay.
say, we have to be talking, interacting with at least 10 people a day. And an interaction can be catching them on the phone and talking with them. It can be interacting over email. It can be a social. It can be, talking to someone in the street when you're at Starbucks and stuff like that. But we have to have those conversations because those conversations is what's going to lead to our appointment number. And then leave it to them to figure out how to make that happen. If they can't make it happen, then it goes back to, okay, are we training them enough? Are we holding them accountable? Are they just in the wrong job? I mean, if you're highly introverted and you don't like talking to people, and your job is to go out and talk to people every day, I mean, maybe you're in the wrong job. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, that's a good point, because I'm from this is a personal, also something I agree on. Like, it's a question from me as well. I can relate to this because, I mean, we have SDRs internally at our company, and I'm on them like every week and asking them why they haven't made the dials, because what I'm seeing is when they're successful, everything is really good. But when they're not, it's like taking a salesperson. You need to close $1 million US or $100,000. You're not doing it. How many deals are you actually managing? How many proposals did you send out? How many meetings have you actually made with clients? And then you go backwards. So if you don't build enough pipeline as an SDR, if you don't have enough conversations, you need to go down to the activities. And if you're only sending emails and not calling, or not doing anything, like, it goes down to the activities. And where should we, like, you raised a good point, because maybe that's a focus we should be moving more into, like the conversations. And you also mentioned that a conversation doesn't have to be on the phone, which is To me, it's on the phone. And I might be wrong, obviously, since you've been doing this and seeing success. But for me, a conversation is when you're speaking to somebody. Like sending an email and somebody answers back, that's not as valuable for me as if you get them on the phone. Or am I totally off track here? What's your feedback?
No, I mean, I think we always say that the phone is the most customizable and fastest communication method that we have right now. It brings in your personality. It's a great channel, and I think that if SDRs are not making the phone a big part of their mix, they're blowing it. From your perspective as a manager, there's different ways to hold people accountable, and it's a tough job. I mean, and it's not a job for everybody. So it could be a situation where we have a 3-strike policy, and I'm going into American baseball, but there's a 3-strike policy. If you don't hit your conversation number and your appointment set number for the first month, strike 1. If you don't hit it for the second month, strike 2. If you don't hit it by the end of the 3rd month, then we're going to have to part ways because it's just not the right job for you. And that takes away all the bumpiness and the having to hold them accountable, that you only made 99 dials instead of 100. It's like, dude, I don't care how many dials you made or any of that stuff. Did you make your number or not? Because ultimately that's all that matters. So yeah, different ways to look at it.
No, that's interesting. So basically, conversations, meetings booked, and eventually, like pipeline built would be whatever dials or whatever it really isn't relevant. It isn't, and it's like somebody closing every deal he should be closing. I don't care how he closed the deal, he just did it. Like how many proposals, 10 or 2? I don't care, because you have a bigger, you have a better hit rate. Like, so you're closing both of them as opposed to the other one who's losing like 8 of 10. So, okay, good. So really good. That's good advice. I have another question from one of the attendees. What is could you say that there is a general salary level for SDRs in Silicon Valley, in the Valley? How much money do they make? Like, what is commission based? How much is fixed? Is there a standard fee?
Yeah, there's some really good research out there. If you have a pen and paper, it's from Betts Recruiting, BETTS Recruiting, puts out a comp report, and also a company called Closer IQ, which is another recruiting firm. They both put out comp reports that are very accurate and relevant each year. But what we see is the Bay Area it's a higher salary market. Bay Area and NYC, you're looking at a 50K base with a 75K on target earnings plus. So that's really, really high. And if you go to the middle of the country in Denver or Chicago or those type of places, you're looking at like a 40K base with a 20K on target, so 60 on target earnings, and it goes up from there. So it's pretty high. I mean, it's still pretty high.
Do you think should SDRs, really good SDRs, earn more money than the salespeople?
Yeah, I mean, there's if you think about it, I mean, the salespeople are not going to be able to sell much if they don't have appointments and they don't have any pipeline.
Exactly.
And I think that they're what I saw in the corporate world, and I still see with my clients, is the salespeople are sitting there going, marketing sucks and the SDR team sucks and I don't have any appointments and I'm gonna miss my number and all this stuff, and it's just like a bunch of crap, but it's the reality of the situation. So we got to figure out, one, is that sales rep who's saying that stuff going to make it? And 2, are we doing everything we can from a marketing and SDR perspective to support them?
So do you have Do you have any good like cases, companies who've actually implemented this and had a really good journey where they actually like they began over here and now they're super successful, and these are the key takeaways and how they did it?
Yeah, I look back on a company called Miyagi, which we worked with a couple of years ago, and it was that same type of situation. So it was a technical co-founders who got some funding, and they at that point didn't. They were doing all the sales themselves, but they, obviously as a co-founder, you don't have a lot of time to do the prospecting and the labor that we're talking about. So we created a strategy to say, let's start with sales development. Let's make sure that we fill up the calendars to the point where the technical co-founders are super busy. Once their calendars are filled with qualified appointments, then we'll start hiring salespeople. And they were able to take that strategy and scale it, and continue to grow successfully. And if in a perfect world, I would suggest that all companies do that, and they hire Tenbound to help them with the strategy. But that's just me.
Perfect. Yeah, and what about sales development in larger like organizations, enterprise? Do you have any examples where you've worked with enterprise clients and really where you've delivered really good results?
Yeah, absolutely. So we helped one. I mentioned this earlier. Create a CDR program, which was interesting. So a customer development rep program where they had a huge install base and a lot of large companies on their subscription product. But after some quick analysis, we realized that they were only selling, a small number of licenses to these huge companies. So if you think about it, the customer development rep is like the SDR, going after either inbound leads that come in or cold accounts. The CDR is someone who's very strategically, not spamming, but very strategically going in and identifying new opportunities within the install base. That one, when we started that, we put the strategy in place, and they're going gangbusters now with the program.
So that's interesting. I think
Yeah.
because the normal way to see the SDR organization is like this is they do stuff with marketing qualified leads, they convert them into meetings, and that's it. But in terms of another like buzzword, account-based marketing, like to use them as a really strategic weapon within an account-based marketing setup is really valuable. So you don't need to break new ice like bring in new clients. You could actually do this, as you said, on enterprise clients to grow the accounts with the help of SDRs as well.
Exactly. I mean, account-based marketing, is a big buzzword right now, and it's being pushed really heavily by the software vendors that can help you to organize, your account-based marketing strategy. So there's a lot of people talking about it, but what we see in working with clients is that it's a lot of work. I mean, there's a lot of that upfront prioritization and sorting and coordination across sales SDR, marketing SDR and sales to make sure that those campaigns run correctly. And it's not as easy as just plugging in a piece of software and going, okay, we're doing account-based marketing now. So yeah, again, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but you've got to be more strategic about how you put this together and take a step back and do some more
I
planning.
I love broken records. I'm actually one of my inbound. I mean HubSpot. I mean inbound. That's HubSpot because they sell a system, which is really good. You have sales enablement companies doing sales enablement stuff because they want to sell the products, which is totally fine. But eventually, like at the end, you need to have a plan. You need to know where you're going, where you're starting, and what the plan is. And again, talking about tech stacks, like what kind of tools are available for salespeople and SDRs, hundreds. How do you choose? Well, you have a plan and you define your target market, you find out where you might be reaching them and what kind of tools you need, or you'll end up like using 25 tools and you don't really know why you're having all of those.
Yeah, yeah, and not to overcomplicate things. I mean, this could be as simple as just mapping out your process on a whiteboard,
Exactly.
and making sure that you understand, where there's any gaps, and then strategically filling those gaps with either a new process, new people, or a new piece of technology, versus, like you said, just plugging in things and people, and just kind of it would be it would be comical, the way that some people do it. So you just have to be more strategic about it.
Okay. We're actually 5 minutes from ending. It's been a blast, and I've totally lost track of time, as I expected to be doing. I'm just going to see if we have any additional questions from the attending people for the webinar. I've gone through the ones we've received. I don't think we have any. Well, we have one like how do you track marketing in the US? Do you have any standard metrics for like how does marketing actually contribute to revenue? How do you hold them responsible?
Yeah, so a lot of companies still use the Serious Decision waterfall, if you're familiar with Serious Decisions, and that's MQLs, SQLs, and ultimately pipeline and revenue. And so that's not as a effective model for account based, so that people are still trying to figure out how do they how do they um, how do they track metrics for account based, because that model is more set up for demand generation. But I mean, a lot of companies in the US, they still use um, MQLs, SQLs, appointments, pipeline, and revenue.
Yeah. What would you use instead? Like, would you get rid of the MQLs?
That's a really good question. I mean, if you uh, look at it from an account-based perspective, it's how many accounts do you have prioritized in the system, and how active are they? Because there's a lot of tools that can tell you if that somebody from that account is looking you up on G2 Crowd, or they're looking at your website and things like that. So you can get that activation metric in your CRM, and you could say, okay, so, there's a group of people from this account that are really interested in us right now. And then the next one is, okay, how many people do we have attached to that account that work there, and how often are we communicating with them? And so measuring that on a daily basis, and then from that communication, how effective are we in setting appointments with them? And so this is pretty cutting edge. I haven't seen a lot of companies do this successfully, but it's starting to be talked about.
Okay. Perfect. Before we end, tell us a bit about, correct me if I'm wrong, you've gone from, you did help clients at the beginning to actually, you gave them resources like hire an SDR from us, we'll do the work. You trained them, you did this. You've moved into more focusing on training, coaching, and events, if I'm not misunderstanding it. What I like about what you do is actually the events you have. So you have a few in the States. When you're looking forward, like maybe to next spring, you're doing stuff in Europe as well. Tell us, like just a few minutes before we end, how do we find these events? Why should we attend? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. I mean, yeah, exactly. So when I first started, it was consulting and training, doing strategy consulting, and then helping to train the SDRs. And we still do that. We've got a nice book of business, but we've really morphed into, we want to be the sort of the center of the sales development universe, and have the best information, the best research, and bring the community together in these events. So yeah, to your point, I'd love to see everybody that's on the webinar, the hundreds of people here. We've got one in in New York City in June, which isn't. I looked it up, and from Sweden, it's only like $300. round trip, which is not that bad. And then we've got San Francisco in August, and these are big gatherings of the top sales development professionals globally, where you can, if you love talking about this, which you must if you're still on the webinar, you got to be at these things.
Perfect. And where do we find you? So where do we find Tenbound? How do we connect with you? How do we get in touch with you if we want to take this move along with this dialogue, like on LinkedIn or through your website?
Yeah, 100%. I would just, go to tenbound, tenbound.com and jump on the newsletter. I mean, that's the best way to keep posted on everything that we're doing. And then, LinkedIn, it's David Dulany, Dulany. And I would love to connect with anybody. I mean, my dream, I talked about it with my kids, is to go and visit you someday. So let's start the connection.
Perfect. Cool. Thank you. 5:31 local Swedish time. I'm done. I could be doing this. People are starting to leave now, but I could do this for another few hours. Let's do this another time. Thank you so much for getting up like in the middle of the night to do this with our Swedish audience, and I know that this has been very valuable. I know that the ones who are following us and attending our webinars know that we are very, very much invested into SDRs and the sales development part. So it's the right audience. And again, thank you, and let's stay in touch, and have a great day. I'm having dinner soon and then going to bed.
Well, I've really enjoyed it and happy to help. Any questions, anything, let's definitely connect, reach out anytime. And good luck with your sales development program, everybody.
Thank you. All right. Bye-bye.